Hi and welcome to the Motion Mile After Effects tutorial. I'm Mackenzie Criswell, and today we've got a very exciting new tutorial. Okay, so this is a very well-rounded tutorial. We've got After Effects, Cinema 4D, Photoshop, Illustrator. It's going to be fun. So in this tutorial, we're using Photoshop, we're using Illustrator, we're using Cinema 4D, we're using After Effects. It's going to be awesome. Sounds like a lot, but it's actually pretty simple. So let's jump right into this. What you can see is I've got a logo here. This is just really simple. This can be created in anything. After Effects, Photoshop, if that's your thing. You can make it in Illustrator, which would actually make this process a little easier, but for our purposes, what you will need is a JPEG or PNG or GIF, any version of a logo or an image that you want to then extrude into the shape that was, of course, in the bumper that you saw earlier. So let's get started. Actually, just a quick tip in Photoshop. This particular image is actually really huge. As you can see, so what I'll do before we get started, and if you don't know this is incredible, I'll just come up to image and I'll do image size, and I can actually just scale it down right here. I can see the pixels already, and I'll just make it about 10% of its current size, 500 by 500, and then jump up to 100%. So nice logo, and now to the fun part. Okay, so what we want to do is select this logo, just the black area, not the remaining PNG, just transparent area that means nothing. And in Photoshop, it's awesome because there's actually a few different ways to do that. So one of my favorite ways is just to grab this tool over here. It's called the Quick Selection tool, and just kind of grab a bit that we like, and it'll figure it out almost instantly with an image like this. This is, of course, just either pixel or nothing, but there's a few other ways to do it. If you do have an image, but maybe there's a picture behind it, but there is a logo in the foreground, one thing that you can do is select a color range, and just select that color. What else is there? There's a lasso tool that actually literally just allows you to draw around the shape in the areas that you want to keep, and not the ones that you don't. And even if push really comes to shove, there's actually even this pen tool down here that will allow you to just actually create the actual shape manually. So let's do that. Also, Command-Alt-Z will go backwards multiple times in Photoshop, if you didn't know that. Usually, hitting Command-Z will just go back and forth between the same action, but Alt-Z will get the job done. So that quick selection worked pretty well for us, so we'll just kind of highlight the whole thing here. And the next thing I want to do is I want to right-click on this path here. And what I want to do is I want to make it a work path, and what that's going to do is just make it still an editable path to edit things with, but just make it a little more permanent. There's more stuff that it does, but for our purposes, that'll work. And the tolerance, this is just going to amount to how many pixels the work path will vary based on the path that you just drew. So for us, 0.5 is 0.5 will work just fine. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is actually just export this into a format that Illustrator can read really easily, and that's an Illustrator work path. So what we'll do is we'll do export, and that's file export, and then we'll do export as an Illustrator work path. So down here we have paths to Illustrator and work path. Okay, and I'm putting these on the desktop, and here it is. We'll do, and there we go. So let's go ahead and now open up Cinema 4D. All right, awesome. So here's our new Cinema 4D project. I'm not the best in the world with the controls of Cinema 4D because I don't use it all that often, but to my understanding, holding down Alt and the left mouse button will allow you to rotate the camera. Hitting the middle mouse wheel, just tapping it, will come out to the different views here. Command does command and the right click. Let's see, Alt in the middle mouse pans around, and Alt in the left click brings up an update menu. Oh, Alt in left click zooms in. So those are just kind of some basic controls. That's about the extent of my knowledge. But what we want to do to go ahead and just get started here is we're going to do File, and we want to do Merge Objects. And this is where we get to load up that Illustrator path that we just created. Cinema 4D does, of course, read Illustrator paths, so that's why we can do this pretty easily. So we're just going to jump in, and we'll set this scale to 1 and hit OK. So keep in mind, based on the logo that you're using, the size that it comes in at will actually vary greatly. The first time that I did this logo, I didn't actually scale it down, and so it was absolutely humongous when I imported it into Cinema 4D, and I had to scale it down a ton to get it to work right. So let's see. Let's hop out to a few views here and just kind of get it centered up nicely. Let's see. And so you'll notice this logo isn't actually quite centered, and we've centered it based on our eye. But what we can do is just hit this Enable Axis button over here. The shortcut is L, apparently. Oh, that works. Okay, so hit L, and then we actually get control over this little gizmo, and we can just move it here to where it's centered. And that's going to come into play just a little later in the tutorial, so make sure you do that. And now this is pretty much centered up and looking good. So you can see there's a few different paths here in our logo, so we'll go ahead and drag these out. And what we need to do is create a new extrude object for each one of these. So if we just start with one, we can drag on this new extrude object, and let's do a little bit of editing. So let's come in here and see about moving around. There we go. So if we get a nice look here, you can see we've got a very minimal, kind of thin bevel. It's not really what we want. So first thing we'll do is actually just come over here to Object and bring up the movement to something a little thicker, maybe 150. This is in centimeters. If that matters to you, you can change it. Let's do maybe 225. All right, that looks good. And so the next thing we'll do is we'll actually just come over here to the caps. And as you can see, we've got, if we really zoom in closely here, we have kind of a rough edge right here. It's just kind of a straight pixel for pixel line. And so what we'll do is change that to a fillet cap. And what that'll do is just make a little more of a nicer, cleaner edge here. We can also have it end as a fillet cap, and what that'll do is adjust the backside here, so you can see cap and the fillet cap. And if we just change it to fillet, it won't have the cap on the end of it. So there we go. And then if we bring up the radius, we can make it bigger or smaller. And then the steps is basically the same as a segment control. And we'll put the back to cap, so because we're never really going to see it. So that looks good. And what I'll do is copy and paste this extrude NURB by doing the Command V, Command C. And let me delete that path from underneath it. Copy that one. And then we need 3 more. 1, 2, 3. So now let's just drag all these paths underneath their own individual extrude NURB. It will be pretty obvious to see if you don't do this correctly, because one of your pieces will not be extruded. So, all right, looking pretty good so far. And so actually real quick, what we'll do just to group these a little bit is we'll do create object null, and then we'll drag all these into this null object. And this works pretty much identically to a null object in After Effects if you've ever used one. It's just going to be a dummy object that's going to act as a parent for all of these that are inside of it. And now we can create a new plane. There it is. And what we'll do is first scale this up a lot. Maybe as high as 10,000 by 10,000. This is way over the top, actually more than likely, so you don't need to really worry about that. And also segments. If you really are cringing for render time, you can actually turn these down to 1 and 1 because this is basically just a flat object. But we'll just leave it on the default, which was 20 and 20. And then we'll come over here and come to the rotate. And I believe if we hold down shift, we can actually rotate. No, it's command. We can rotate based on 10-degree increments. And so there we go. And what we'll do now is we'll take our logo here and we'll actually scoot it back just a little bit more so that it'll be just hidden behind this plane. And now we need to set up some render settings. So, oops, wrong button. If we hit this button right here with the gear and the playhead or film slate, we can kind of bring up some nice settings. So let's go ahead and edit some things. So first of all, the default resolution in Cinema 4D is totally whack. So we'll go ahead and set that to probably 1080p. Of course, when I'm working with larger 3D files, I actually like to render at 4K a lot of times. So we'll actually just go ahead and do that here. If we go ahead and type in 4096, kind of a standard 4K resolution, we don't even have to know the actual resolution. We can just tell it here that we want to do HD, and it'll tell us 2304. And okay, and then we want to do some work with the frames. What we want to do is basically calculate our frame rate. So if you're doing film, you probably want 24 frames a second. If you're doing internet and you don't really care, probably 30 or 60. So for this, we'll do 24. And if we want a 5-second long intro, we need 120 frames at the very least. So we'll go ahead and grab 120 frames there. Of course, we can save a render output. That's probably not the worst idea. So we'll come out here to our desktop and make a new folder called render motion mile logo. And what else? TIFF layers are fine, and these are a pretty high quality image. If you don't know, you always want to try to get the best quality possible, so 32 bits. You can also render to a straight QuickTime file down here, but it's often better to render in image sequences and then put the actual video together in an editor later on. But what we really want to do actually here in the renderer, other than set up the resolution, is we want to come to Effect, and we want to turn on something called Ambient Occlusion. And what this will do is create some very, well actually, for the purposes of this tutorial, we'll turn it off to begin with. And that'll make it easier to see what it does. Okay, so here is our logo. And what we want to do is now keyframe some different positions for the logo to be at. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just hit this key button here to key our object at this point, and we'll come to about halfway through the video, and we'll go ahead and just pull this logo out so that it is revealed from within this plane here. And set that key, and if we take a look at what's happening now, looks awesome. And then what we'll also do is come back to the same frame, come over to rotation, set another key, and then we'll come over here and we'll rotate it some. And you want to make sure that you set the key here, because if you do not, it's not going to set. It's just going to stay there. It's not going to automatically know what you're doing. It's a little less fluid than After Effects, so you need to make sure you set the key. So we'll rotate, set the key, and then as we kind of scrub through, we can see some basic renders of what's going on. And if we hit this button here, we can always just do a really, really quick, easy preview. And this will actually be a good enough time to go ahead and show you what ambient occlusion is going to do for us. So you can see here with this render, we have basically no shadows. We've got kind of this default bluish gray nasty material that C4D gave us. That's fine. You're almost always going to change it. But let's go ahead and pop on just the default ambient occlusion and take a look at what it does. So the first thing it does is speed up the render time. But as you can see, we've got some really, really great close shadows just instantly created here that add so much depth to any 3D design. It's incredible what it does. So let's try and work with ambient occlusion a little bit. So the first thing I'll do is I'll actually just take this white and I'll bring it down to a very dark gray. And in case you didn't figure it out or don't know, this is a gradient of the value of the shadow. So this is the lowest point of the shadow over here, and this is the highest point of the shadow over here. So then let's do a render, and you can see black image. So that's not really what we want to do. Well, it's not a complete black image. You can see the outline there, but you get the idea. So now let's come over here and let's lighten this up a little bit, but let's still not go all the way to white. Let's stay at kind of a mid color. And so now let's do the render. And you can see we still have the color. It's a little darker, but we have very intense ambient occlusion, shadows. Now, of course, moving the gradient, we'll do kind of the same thing, but a little differently. So let's just make it a very close gradient. And as you can see, there's only just a little bit of black here because most of our gradient is full white. Now if we take a look, we have little to no ambient occlusion. Of course, going in the other direction, we'll do the opposite, as would changing the gradient. Take a look. Very intense shadows without the darkening. So that's kind of the point that I was trying to make, is when you don't actually change the colors, you don't darken the whole image, you're darkening just the shadows. So that is the way that I recommend doing it, is editing the position of the gradient rather than changing the actual colors. Of course, moving this mid piece, again, just helps to add more white than black, but it still retains some of the curve to the color. So we'll take this pretty close to the default, maybe just a touch darker, and that will be more than fine for our tutorial. So the next thing we want to do is put up a few lights. And before we do that, what we want to do is go ahead and set up the view that we'll actually be rendering at, which, if you noticed in the bumper, was again just kind of a quick bird's eye view shot of what's going on. So let's use this front view over here to try and line that up. Again, holding down Alt and moving the middle mouse button to line that up. And we'll zoom out quite a bit as this was. And we'll do view and, sorry, it's display. And we'll do just the regular shading. And then if we come up to view, we can actually say use this view right here as the render view. As you can see, when we go ahead and hit, when we hit this button here, it will want to render. This is to do the final render. It's going to want to render out of the side perspective view that we already set up. So just saying, okay, no, use this as the render view will stop it from doing that, and instead it will render out of the front. So let's then now set up some lights. So we'll come over and we'll just do kind of a normal light. And let's see, I'll start by dragging it. Let's pump back out to the perspective here, and I'll drag it outwards first, then over, up a little, and then let's see. Let's do, and this is just going to be kind of a soft light. And let's see. Let's take a look at what we're getting. Okay, not too bright. Let's brighten it up a little, maybe. And then let's have it cast some shadows, just kind of a soft shadow map. Okay, that's pretty dark. Let's tone down the color. Maybe that'll be probably the easiest way to... Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting something. Okay. Of course, turning up the shadow map down here, the resolution will just make your shadows higher or lesser quality. This will also, however, impact render time, so just kind of keep that in mind. So let's just edit the position of this just a little bit more, make it just a little brighter, and take a look. Okay, looks nice. So that's kind of a basic shadow, and before we start adding a bunch of shadows, we should probably go ahead and do at least something pretty close to the shading that will be on the final render. So if you notice, it was just kind of a nice kind of matte white color. So we'll try to recreate that here, which is actually as simple as just taking the color and knocking it to pure white. That's about it. Simplest texture you will ever make in a 3D program. And then we'll drop this onto, whoops, not the light, onto the plane here. And now, take a look. And, okay, so this is why we wanted to kind of work with this a little bit. As you can see, this just got very bright. So we've got a few options here. We can tone down the color a little bit and make it a very light gray. And that might do some stuff to help out. As you will recall, we did turn up the intensity of our light just a little. So let's definitely knock that back down to at least 100%. Okay, so that actually does a lot. And we can probably actually put this back at pure white. All right, looks good. And all right, so what we'll do really quick is just add an area light really quickly, and that'll just help kind of cast just kind of a general light over everything that's going on. This is going to be a pretty a light that's pretty far away from the design, but that is just going to, as you can see, overall brighten up everything here. So we'll actually turn this down to about 30%, maybe even lower. I mean, let's see. We just want to cast kind of a general shadow over everything. So once we get that to a manageable level, okay. What we'll do is we'll turn on some soft shadows again. We'll do area shadows. And this is just going to add a little bit more detail to the ambient occlusion that's already there, and also cast just kind of a flat shadow around where the object is, and just make it a little more predominant. Of course, if you want your shadow to be longer on the actual logo, you can always just move your light farther away, changing the location will completely change the direction of the shadow. It moves exactly to the inverse of wherever you put it. I didn't really like the way that particular shadow looked with the detail over on this side from the opposite direction, so that's why I was kind of sticking the light over here. But you could even kind of do some shadows from underneath if you wanted to. That's actually a pretty cool look. I didn't think about doing that before. Yeah, so that's what a lot of the 3D part of this design is just playing around until you get a look that you like. There are obviously a ton of these you can do. Here's another one that I really, really liked. Here's kind of a matte black color. Let's take a look at that. Whoops, actually should probably change it. And if we take a quick look, we get just a dark, a much darker, cooler, kind of interesting shadow. What else can we do? There's quite a few other designs you can come up with. Here's one. There are obviously plenty of different designs you can come up with using just really, really basic materials. And it will look it'll just look amazing. So let's go ahead and just render out this design right as it is, kind of this red and white. Of course, to create the red object, you just change the color to kind of a nice red that you like. This is kind of the muted motion mile kind of red that we like. So let's go ahead, and since we've got everything set up here, we did render out a few frames. So if you open up your Finder, come to Desktop, and delete those actually several frames that we rendered out, we probably want to do that. So, and then if we come over here to our picture viewer, we can start a brand new render. So this is going to take quite a while to render out. But once your render is done, you're going to want to hop over to After Effects, and this is where we're going to do just some final touches and get everything ready to go. So if we hold down Alt and go ahead and click right here, we can hop up to 32 bits per channel. We did render in 32 bits per channel, so we just want to kind of keep things consistent, and also that's going to give you the best color quality regardless. So give me one sec. Now we did render in 4K, but we're actually going to finish in 1080. The 4K is just to give us a little bit more flexibility as to design and animation finally. So we'll do the 5-second comp, and we'll call this simple design. And oh, right, frame rate. Also, just want to line up the frame rate with whatever you used. We were calculating based on, calculating our total frames based on 24. So, okay, looking nice. And now we need to go ahead and import our image sequence. So we'll do File, Import a File. Also Command-I or double-clicking over here will do that. And hop out to the desktop. Here's our render. And alright, should automatically highlight a TIFF sequence. I do believe on PCs the same checkbox is right down here in the same area in the Explorer window. We do get a little bit of a preview here. Yeah, so open. Okay, and so as with most image sequences, we need to do a little bit of work to get everything set up correctly. So what we'll do is right-click, go over to Interpret Footage, and mainly what we want to do is make sure that we're setting the frame rate up correctly, it's almost never right. And also, we can't see to click OK here, so I'll just hit enter. There we go. 24 frames a second. And also, one thing to mention, if you recall, our project in Cinema 4D was actually 120 frames long. And if we look down here, we can see that this is also 120 frames long. But you'll notice I actually only rendered out, 86 frames. After that, I kind of got tired of waiting, and so I stopped the render. But if you'll recall, our animation kind of stopped moving, or at least started to move very little after about the 5-second point. So what we'll do is just a quick trick that you can do, not all the time, but occasionally with a 3D render, and we'll come to the point where the animation has stopped or is moving very little, and what I'll do is I'll make a copy of this, so edit, copy, and then nice edit and paste, and then what I'll do is I'll right click right here, and I'll choose time and freeze frame. And then if I hit Command-Shift-D, I can split this clip and then just drag it out. And what you'll see is now that logo will stay past that point, past the point where it would have ended. So just really quickly, we've patched that up. And we still do want to manipulate this as one video, so just to keep that running smoothly, we'll just pre-compose this and logo. Alright, looking nice. So, actually, on that pre-comp, we do actually need to reset the resolution as well back to 4K. Just keep that in mind. Okay. So now, what we'll do is we'll do kind of a nice pan in and out just by scaling up and down the logo. So let's see, we'll have it start at about 55% over here, and then just scale it down as we go. We can actually just do transform fit to comp, and that'll get it as close as we can. So now if we look, as the animation kind of spins on, we also have kind of a nice pan out. One other thing I want to do is the image is pretty flat, so it's not sticking right. If you kind of know what I mean, it's almost like when you crop an image, but you don't do it well. So you've cropped the image, and you can only see what is there now, but you can still kind of tell the image still has kind of the shape of being cropped, and you can tell that there's something that's gone. So a lot of times a really easy way to fix that is to just do a quick vignette. So that's what we'll do here, and this definitely won't be a heavy vignette at all. It'll be very, very light. So I just created a new black solid, and I'm changing the blending mode to soft light. Of course, if these options aren't showing up, you can hit all these various buttons down here at the bottom on the timeline until they do. And if you hit T, or do this drop down here, we'll just lower the opacity till it's very, very subtle, and then we'll grab a quick ellipse tool mask, just click right there, hit subtract, and honestly, it's actually kind of a cool look, but just a nice, we'll bring the drop down here and then feather it out, and that's something nice. And then also what I'll do is I'll make a duplicate copy of this, so Command C and V, and then what I'll do is I'll bring up the mask options by hitting M, and I'll actually delete this mask, but then I'll come over here to the pen tool, and I'm just going to draw kind of a nice bevel on the screen. And then, let's see, let's edit this a little bit. I don't really like the way it looks. Maybe something like that. And then I'll just kind of lower the opacity even a little more. I just want it to be a very subtle, kind of sharp edge here to add some interesting detail. Okay, so that looks really nice, and so that's looking really nice. Definitely digging that. So let's just add one more solid, and if we hit this button here, we can make it an adjustment layer, so every effect we put on this will affect all the layers. And one thing that I do want to point out that you can do actually very easily, since this red is such a big color, and is really the only layer in this color combination that we chose here, is we can actually just kind of change it. This is very easy to manipulate. Of course, you know, different companies have different color sets that they like to use, different levels of intensity on those. Some are very subtle, darker, lighter. There's a lot you can do with just this simple hue and saturation control. So, as far as recycling old designs and saving time, this is definitely a design that applies to that. So, we'll actually leave it at the red color, but kind of the blandness of this is really just doesn't seem to fit. So I'm going to add just a little pop of color. And yeah, looks amazing. So that's all for this tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out motionmile.com for more great motion graphics tutorials. See you next time.